So, as y'all can tell from some of my most recent videos, things in my life have changed a lot. So, I got divorced and I don't get to see my kids now. And just saying divorced, imagine what what happened that would make that happen, right? It's kind of like the whole movement on YouTube of people with like the men going their own way and explaining some of the things about uh, how you know sometimes people get the tendency to get bored, right? So you know I didn't know this about myself, and that's kind of why I wanted to make this video. But when I was little, my friend had taught me nature magic, and I had gone to church a lot when I was 13. So I was kind of scared, like, oh no, like uh, nature magic. And he taught me how you use your hands to make an electron on the ground, and then you kind of do 1, 2, 3 tactics, and just kind of, it's a little game. You just play with stuff on the ground and play with some dirt or play with some rocks, play with some acorns or pine straw and moss and fungi, the fun guys, the little mushrooms and stuff. And like I take everything to extreme because I'm hypersensitive. So I was very paranoid that somehow I was disobeying God. And well, all there is in this world is nature. And I love that saying because it's like everything is nature. It's like the dirts, the rocks, the plants, us, we're a part of nature. The animals, the fungus, the fish, the water, the the magnetosphere, and all this, like the sun, which is kind of more like a electricity than it is a big ball of fire. If you actually research what the sun is, that's an interesting study about how it's kind of like a big ball of electricity in some ways, but giving off its light and all of that. I guess it's called fission or fusion. Fusion. Nuclear fission is not the same as fusion, but one or the other. But so it's interesting what you would plan out as a 13-year-old trying to do nature magic, and how you could lock away something subliminally until it could emerge at a time. And the real kicker is like learning to listen to nature, like listening to the birds and listening to the animals and the trees and the wind and just what the sounds everything makes, and like turning that into voices. It's really the heart of a musician, is like whenever you kind of have that, it could be, in some ways you might think of it as a curse or a blessing, because once you start pretending like these things have voices, it really can become a lot about like what you are on a subliminal level. It like unblocks your subliminal mind about like what you would be hearing, what you would be thinking if all of that were true. Well, I locked that away because that was my mission. Me and my friend were trying to figure out what we would do if revelations were true and how we would overcome that and defeat it. And he was like, "Would you do a Ouija board with me?" And I was like 13, and I was like, "Only because it's you." Because like he was into Legos and erector sets and those type of things. So I was like, if it was like someone who was like an evil person, I would never have touched it. But because this was his thought. His thought was, if words like clairvoyance and telekinesis and magic and stuff like that exist, like, wouldn't some part of that be true? So that was kind of his theory going into it. And then it just so happened when I moved to Oklahoma that year, my friend, I was telling about God, like, do you believe in God? Like when we first met. And he was like, well, if there is a way of knowing God, all there is nature. And he taught me his little tricks about nature magic. And whenever you made your little electron, he called the electron that you created a piece of Dougie dope. And it was nature magic. And by the time I was done with my little magic ritual, I said, the reason I would have never played this game would be because of the word magic and the word dope. And I said if I could go back in time, I would call the little nature spirit or the little electron you create, I would have called it Dougie Too Dope, because that just means he's really cool. And I would have just called it Playing with Nature instead of Nature Magic, because, you know, it was a little 13-year-old's confliction about whether it was right to do these things, you know. And the first time my friend who taught me nature magic, his mom wanted to play tarot cards, she flipped it and it was the death card. I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, it means you're going to be a hero someday. You're going to go through hell. You're going to go through a lot, but you're going to be a hero. All right, let's make something to eat. Like, she just kind of shrugged it off. But these little things stick with you like that when you, the only way magic can be true is if you have intention. And, you know, nature in a lot of ways is so neglected by us that, you know, there's not a lot of interest in even the idea of magic, and nobody who plays with nature would really expect to get anything out of it if they didn't really think about applying like these concepts of like the voice or like silencing your mind and like listening to the wind, like, you know, the Pocahontas, have you ever heard the wolf cry, you know, all that kind of thing, like, or heard, like, listen to the wind and those kind of things, you know. Even in Disney movies, like, I was playing my games and it's like the way Mickey Mouse is doing all of that, like wand slinging, he's a schlinger, and the bippity boppity, so I'd be like bippity boppity. And just taking a little bit of magic that I did know and applying it. So now that I'm older, though, and I went through the things I went through, you can see how those things can be locked within you for so long. Because I remember when I started, you know, experiencing my first experiences with substances, is that, you know, like caffeine. You know, the first time you drink a cup of coffee when you're like 4, or you have a sip of some, you know, you're like, whoa, man, I like that. And you don't really think, you know, it's like, I like that. It's like, I like that. But the enjoyment you can get out of that, or like the first time you sneak and grab a sip of a wine cooler or something like that, you know, your first experience with like caffeine or alcohol. And then even, you know, the first time someone sneaks over and has a cigarette and you take a puff of it and it just burns your lungs. I remember my dad had a can of snuff I got into when I was like probably like 7 or 8, and I found it and I was reading it, you know, teaching your kids how to read, right? And so I just took a little bit and I was like, what in the world is that? You know? So it's just nature. That's all there is nature. Now, can we overdo nature? Yes. Is it good to abuse nature? No, not necessarily. But whenever Ray talked about that, and like whenever Matt taught me that, and then you incorporate like the caffeine and the nicotine and the other crazy things people come up with that you had never imagined in your life along the way to do with these purified substances that are just nature. That's all it is. Which, whenever I think back on that now, and I had that locked away inside me, that's just insane to think that you could set yourself up. Like, some people are on mission, but I am on quest. I remember, like, in my meditations, thinking that, you know, and are coming up with that in my mind. Like, some people are on mission, but I am on quest. Like, he's on some other stuff, you know, like these sayings, and, you know, you learn along the way. Like, there's a bunch of things